Have you ever been so tired that the world around you just stopped mattering? Not the tired that comes from a bad night's sleep. The other kind. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that follows you from the alarm clock to the double shift to the school pickup to the empty refrigerator to the unpaid bill on the kitchen counter and back again. Every single day. That was Amara's tired. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't careless. She wasn't someone who gave up easily. She was a 29-year-old single mother who had been fighting quietly, alone, without applause for 3 years straight. And on one ordinary Tuesday evening, she boarded a flight from Chicago to Atlanta with a carry-on bag, a window seat she couldn't afford to upgrade, and eyes so heavy she could barely read the gate number. She had no idea that the man already sitting in seat 14B was about to change everything. She had no idea that falling asleep, the most human, helpless, unguarded thing a person can do, was going to be the thing that finally opened a door she had stopped believing existed. Stay with me. Because what happens on this flight doesn't end when the plane lands. It's only just beginning. Let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of the flight. The beginning of Amara. Because to understand what this moment meant to her, you have to understand what her life looked like before it. Amara Josephine Ellis was 29 years old, and she lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building in Chicago's South Side that had a broken elevator, a landlord who responded to maintenance requests sometime between never and when he felt like it, and a radiator that made a sound like someone was slowly murdering a xylophone every night at 2 a.m. She had one daughter, Zoe, 6 years old, gap-toothed smile, obsessed with butterflies and the color orange, the kind of child whose laugh made you forget, for a few seconds, that the electricity bill was 3 weeks overdue. Amara had been raising Zoe alone since Zoe was 3 years old, since the morning Amara's then-partner Marcus had packed a bag, said he wasn't ready for this kind of life, and walked out of a door he never came back through. She hadn't fallen apart. She had wanted to. There were nights in those early months when she sat on the bathroom floor after Zoe was asleep and let herself cry, not loudly, never loudly, because Zoe was a light sleeper, but deeply, quietly, the kind of crying that doesn't ask for anything because it knows there's no one there to answer. And then she got up. Every time. She got up, went to work, dropped Zoe at Mrs. Patterson's next door, worked her shift at the hospital as an administrative coordinator, picked Zoe up, made dinner from whatever was in the cabinet, read the butterfly book for the 14th time that week, tucked her daughter in, and started over. That was Amara's life. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the life she had pictured at 22, fresh out of college with a communications degree and the particular bright-eyed confidence of someone who hasn't yet discovered what it costs to survive. But it was hers. And she protected it. And she protected Zoe within it with everything she had. The trip to Atlanta had been a last-minute thing. Her hospital's administrative office was sending 2 coordinators to a 3-day healthcare conference, and when her colleague Dana had come down with shingles 48 hours before departure, her supervisor had called Amara into the office and told her she was going instead. "It's a good opportunity," her supervisor had said. Amara had nodded and smiled and said thank you. What she had thought was, I have 48 hours to find someone to watch Zoe, pack a bag, cover my open shifts, and somehow get to O'Hare by 6:15 on a Tuesday evening after a 9-hour shift. She had done all of it. Because that was what Amara did. She arrived at gate B14 with 12 minutes to spare, a carry-on that was slightly too heavy, a sandwich she had bought at the terminal and not yet had time to eat, and eyes that felt like they were being held open by sheer stubbornness alone. She found her seat, 14C, middle seat. Of course. She lifted her carry-on into the overhead bin, sat down, buckled her belt, and looked out the window at the dark tarmac. For the first time in 48 hours, she had nothing left to do. Nothing to organize. Nothing to fix. Nothing to carry. Just a seat. And the hum of the plane. And the weight of 3 years pressing down on her like a warm, heavy hand. She closed her eyes. Just for a minute, she told herself. Just for a minute. She was asleep before they reached cruising altitude. Now let's talk about the man in seat 14B. Daniel Adesanya was 37 years old, and he was depending on who you asked either one of the most impressive self-made entrepreneurs in the country or the most frustratingly private one. He had built Adesanya Capital from a single real estate investment at 24 years old into a diversified portfolio that now included commercial real estate, a logistics firm, a minority stake in a mid-sized tech company, and a philanthropic foundation that funded early education programs in underserved communities across 6 states. His net worth had 7 figures before he was 30, 8 figures before he was 34. He did not talk about it. He did not post about it. He did not arrive at airports in black SUVs with assistants trailing behind him, which was why, on this particular Tuesday evening, he was sitting in seat 14B of a commercial flight to Atlanta in a gray sweater and dark trousers, reading a physical newspaper like it was 1987, with his long legs folded at an angle that suggested he had been meaning to book a better seat and simply hadn't gotten around to it. His assistant Kofi had offered to book first class. Daniel had said the coach seat was fine. Kofi had sent a reply that was simply a period. A single period. Because Kofi had been his assistant for 4 years, and had long since run out of ways to express exasperation professionally. Daniel Adesanya was not a man who needed comfort. He was a man who needed, occasionally, to remember that the world was larger than the rooms he usually moved through: boardrooms, conference rooms, the particular sealed silence of a private office on the 42nd floor. He read his newspaper. He ordered water. He glanced at the empty seat beside him, 14C, as the last passengers boarded. And then she sat down. He noticed her the way you notice anyone who sits 18 inches away from you on an aircraft. Briefly, practically. Carry-on a little heavy. Sandwich in her hand, unopened. Expression of someone running on fumes, but running anyway. He went back to his newspaper. The plane taxied. Lifted. Leveled. He turned a page. And then, very slowly, the woman beside him leaned. He felt it before he fully registered it, the gentle, entirely unconscious weight of her head coming to rest on his shoulder. He went still. He looked down. She was completely, deeply, peacefully asleep. Daniel Adesanya had been in a great many unexpected situations in his professional life. He had navigated hostile negotiations and collapsed deals, and a board meeting that had once memorably ended with someone throwing a water glass. He had not been prepared for this. He sat very still. He looked at her face, the exhaustion in it, yes, but something else too. Something in the set of her jaw, even in sleep, that said this was a person who did not rest easily, who had not rested easily in a long time, and who was, right now, trusting the universe completely without meaning to. He did not move. He folded his newspaper carefully with one hand and set it in the seat pocket. And for the next 2 hours and 14 minutes, Daniel Adesanya, billionaire, board member, man who had not sat still voluntarily in longer than he could remember, did not move a single inch. Because something about this felt important. He couldn't have said why. He just knew. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. When was the last time someone let you rest? Not just physically, but fully, without asking anything of you in return. Drop your answer in the comments. We're listening. And keep watching, because what happens when Amara wakes up is only the beginning of this story. She woke up slowly. The way you wake from the deepest sleep, not all at once, but in layers. First awareness, then warmth, Then the gradual dawning, absolutely horrifying realization that the thing her head was resting on was not a travel pillow. It was a shoulder. A human shoulder. A stranger's human shoulder. Amara's eyes opened completely. She did not move. She was hoping desperately, sincerely hoping that as she stayed very still, the last 30 seconds of realization would reverse themselves. They did not. She lifted her head. The man beside her turned from the window and looked at her with an expression that was calm, measured, and entirely without mockery. "I am so sorry," Amara said. The words came out faster than she intended, stacked on top of each other, her voice still thick with sleep and now sharp with mortification. "I am so sorry. I never do this. I was just exhausted and I." "It's fine," he said. 2 words. Quiet. Entirely genuine. She stared at him. "You've been asleep for 2 hours," he said. 2 hours. 2 hours she had been asleep on this man's shoulder on a commercial flight to Atlanta. "Oh no," she said. "You needed it," he said simply. And then, as if that settled the matter entirely, he reached into the seat pocket and retrieved his newspaper. Amara sat very straight in her seat and stared at the headrest in front of her and performed, with great internal effort, the act of not dying of embarrassment. She snuck a sideways glance at him. He was reading, completely relaxed, as if none of this was unusual in any way. She looked at his hands. His watch understated, expensive, the kind of expensive that doesn't announce itself. His sweater gray, simple, clearly not from anywhere she shopped. She looked forward again. "I'm Amara," she said. She didn't know why she said it. It just came out. He lowered the paper slightly. Looked at her. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel." She nodded. "I'm sorry again. For the shoulder. You apologized twice already. I feel like it warranted at least 3. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. But close. He went back to the paper. She looked at her unopened sandwich and realized she was, in fact, extremely hungry. She opened it. They sat in silence. And somehow impossibly, against all logic given that she had just drooled on this man's shoulder for 2 hours, the silence was not uncomfortable. It was, in fact, the most comfortable Amara had felt in longer than she could remember. She finished her sandwich. He folded his newspaper. "Long day?" he asked. She laughed before she could stop herself, a short, tired, genuine laugh. "You have no idea," she said. "Tell me," he said. She looked at him. He was looking back at her with an expression that was simply attentive. No agenda. No performance. Just a person asking a question and meaning it. She told him. Not everything. Not the bathroom floor crying sessions, or the broken elevator, or the 3 years of running on empty. But some of it, Zoe, the double shifts, the last-minute conference trip, the 48 hours of logistics she just survived. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How old is your daughter?" he asked. 6, Amara said. "She's obsessed with butterflies." He nodded slowly. "My foundation funds a children's nature program in Atlanta," he said. "They have a butterfly garden." She looked at him. "Your foundation," she repeated. "Yes." "You have a foundation." "Yes." A pause. "Daniel," she said carefully. "What do you do?" He looked at her for a moment. "Real estate," he said. "Primarily." "Primarily," she repeated. There was a beat. "Are you very successful at it?" she asked. Another almost smile. "I do all right." She looked at the watch again. Looked at him. "Something tells me," she said slowly, "all right," is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. And this time he actually smiled. Full, genuine. The smile of a man who was not used to being read quickly and found it, against all expectation, a relief. Amara felt something shift in her chest. Small and warm, and slightly alarming. She looked away. The captain's voice came over the intercom announcing their descent into Atlanta. Outside the window, the city lights appeared through the dark, thousands of them, spreading out below like a scattered constellation. Neither of them spoke, but neither of them looked away from the window, and their reflections in the dark glass side by side were closer than they'd started. The plane landed at 9:47 p.m. Amara told herself, very firmly, as she stood in the aisle waiting for the overhead bins to clear, that the pleasant feeling in her chest was simply the result of a good nap and a conversation with a decent stranger. That was all it was. A nap. A conversation. A coincidence. She was a 29-year-old single mother in Atlanta for a healthcare conference. She was not in the business of feeling things about men she had met on airplanes. She had Zoe to think about. She had shifts to cover when she got back. She had a life that was carefully balanced and did not have room for complications. She retrieved her carry-on. She smiled politely at Daniel in the aisle. "It was nice to meet you," she said. "Professional. Clean. Final." "You too," he said. She walked off the plane. She did not look back. She almost made it to the taxi line. "Amara." She turned. He was walking toward her through the arrivals hall, unhurried, his bag over one shoulder, looking at her with that same calm, direct attention. She waited. He stopped in front of her. "The butterfly garden," he said. "I could arrange a visit. For your daughter. When you're back in Chicago." She looked at him. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "We just met." "I know that too." She studied him for a moment, this man who was clearly far outside the ordinary boundaries of her life, who had sat still for 2 hours rather than wake her, who had listened to her talk about Zoe with an attention that felt dangerously like care. "Why?" she asked. He considered the question seriously, which she was already learning was simply how he processed things. "Because your daughter likes butterflies," he said. "And because you look like someone who hasn't been given something without a catch attached in a while." The words landed quietly and precisely, like a stone dropped in still water. She felt the ripple of them move through her. That she stopped. "That's very perceptive of a stranger." "I'm observant," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took out her phone. She told herself, very firmly, that giving him her number was a practical decision. For Zoe. For the butterfly garden. That was all. "Fine," she said. "For the butterfly garden." His expression did not change. But something in his eyes did. "For the butterfly garden," he agreed. She walked to the taxi line. She did not look back. But she was smiling. And she didn't notice when it started. She saw him at breakfast the next morning. Of course she did. Because the universe, Amara was beginning to suspect, had a very particular sense of humor. The conference hotel was large, 400 rooms, 2 restaurants, a rooftop terrace, and enough corporate carpet to cover a small country. There was absolutely no reason for them to end up at adjacent tables in the breakfast room at 7:15 a.m. And yet, she was carrying a plate of scrambled eggs and a coffee when she saw him seated alone at a corner table, reading something on his phone, looking entirely composed and unreasonably put together for 7 in the morning. He looked up. "Amara," he said. "Daniel," she said. A pause. "Are you staying here?" she asked. "I have a meeting here," he said. "Are you staying here?" "Conference," she said. Another pause. "Do you want to sit down?" he asked. She sat down. She told herself it was because all the other tables were full. They were not all full. She sat down anyway. Over eggs and coffee, they talked. Really talked the way people do when the structured politeness of a first conversation has been replaced by something more honest. He told her about the foundation, what it actually did, how it had started, why the education programs mattered to him. She told him about her communications degree, about the hospital job that was meant to be temporary and had stretched into 3 years, about the grant application she had been quietly working on for 6 months. A community health literacy program she had designed herself, on evenings after Zoe was asleep. He put down his phone when she mentioned the grant. "Tell me about it," he said. She hesitated. She was not someone who shared unfinished things. Unfinished things were private. They were vulnerable in a way that finished things weren't. But he was looking at her with that steady, patient attention, and the words came anyway. She told him about the program, the structure, the gap she had identified in her hospital's community outreach, the funding she had applied for twice and not received. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The application," he said. "Who reviewed it?" "The County Health Board." "Did you have anyone look at it before you submitted?" She looked at him. "Like who?" "Like someone who has spent 15 years reading grant applications," he said, "and knows exactly what they're looking for." She stared at him. "Are you offering to look at my grant application?" she asked. "If you want me to," he said. She studied him for a long moment. "Daniel," she said carefully, "what exactly is happening here?" He met her eyes. "I think," he said slowly, "that you have been doing extraordinary things in a very small room for a long time. And I think you deserve a larger room." The words hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. Somewhere she hadn't let anyone near in a very long time. She looked at her coffee. She stopped. "Too much," he said. "No," she said quietly. "It's exactly right." "Which is the problem?" He said nothing, but he understood. She could see that he understood. They stayed at that table for an hour and 40 minutes. Her first conference session started at 9. She made it with 4 minutes to spare. She spent the first 20 minutes of the session not hearing a single word of the presentation. She was thinking about a man who had sat very still for 2 hours on an airplane so she could sleep. And she was thinking that she was in a great deal of trouble. "I need to pause here and ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. Has someone ever seen you, really seen you, when you weren't even trying to be seen? Not your resume, not your strength, not the version of you that holds everything together. Just you. Tell me in the comments. Because Amara is about to discover what that feels like. And it is going to cost her something. Keep watching." It was the second evening of the conference. Amara had spent the day in sessions, taking notes, collecting business cards, doing everything she was there to do. She had been professional and focused and entirely present. She had also, 3 times, taken out her phone and started to text Daniel and put it back in her pocket. At 6:30, her phone buzzed. Rooftop terrace. "If you're free." No agenda. D. She stared at the message for a full minute. Then she went upstairs. He was at a table at the edge of the terrace, 2 glasses of iced tea already on the table. The city spread out below them, lit and moving. She sat. "No agenda," she said. "No agenda," he confirmed. She looked at the city. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "Why are you single?" He looked at her. "A beat. What makes you think I'm single?" "No ring. No mentions. No texts you've stepped away to take." She looked at him directly. "A man like you, if there was someone, we'd know about it." He was quiet for a moment. "I was engaged," he said. "For years ago." She waited. "Her name was Priya. We were together for 3 years." The engagement lasted 8 months. He looked at his glass. She said I was successful at everything except being present, that I could be in a room with her and somehow still be somewhere else. He stopped. Was she right? Amara asked. Yes, he said simply. She was completely right. I just didn't know how to change it. So I didn't. And she left. And she was right too. The honesty of it, the plain, undefended honesty, made something in Amara's chest tighten. I've spent 4 years since then building things, he said. The foundation. The programs. Trying to be present for the work if I couldn't figure out how to be present for a person. He looked at her. Yesterday morning, he said. At breakfast. That was the first time in 4 years I put my phone down in the middle of a conversation and didn't pick it back up. The words settled over the table like something physical. Amara looked at the city. Zoe's father left when she was 3, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out anyway. He said he wasn't ready for that kind of life. I used to be angry about it. Now I'm mostly just tired of carrying the weight of what his leaving did to her. What did it do to her? He asked. She asks sometimes why other kids have daddies, and she doesn't. Amara's voice was steady. She had made it steady through practice. And I tell her that some families look different, and that she is loved enough for 10 families. And she accepts it because she's 6, and she trusts me completely. A pause. And then I go into my room, and I feel the weight of that trust, and I think about how I cannot let her down. He was looking at her. You won't, he said. You don't know that? No, he said. But I know you. Enough. And I know the kind of person who holds themselves to that standard. He paused. Zoe doesn't need to be protected from loss. She already knows how to be loved. You taught her that. Amara looked at him. Her eyes were bright. She did not let them spill. You're doing it again, she said quietly. What? Saying exactly the right thing. He looked at her steadily. I'm not trying to, he said. I'm just listening. She looked away. Below them, Atlanta hummed and glittered. This is dangerous, she said. Softly. Almost to herself. I know, he said. Just as softly. Neither of them moved. But the space between them on the terrace, that careful, negotiated, self-protective space, had gotten very small. The third day of the conference was the last. They had breakfast together again, not by coincidence this time. By agreement. And somewhere between the coffee and the fruit bowl and a conversation about Zoe's butterfly obsession that made him smile 3 times in 10 minutes, Amara made a decision. She was going to stop being afraid of this. Just for today. Just for the next few hours before her flight. She was going to let it be what it was. And what it was she was beginning to understand was something she had not felt since before Zoe was born, before everything had narrowed into survival. Something open. Something light. Something that felt dangerously and wonderfully like possibility. He took her to the butterfly garden that afternoon. It wasn't for Zoe. Zoe was in Chicago. But he had called ahead and gotten them access for an hour, because she had mentioned it, and he had listened, and she was discovering, a man who paid very close attention to the small things people said, and then quietly acted on them. The garden was inside a climate-controlled greenhouse at a botanical center on the east side of the city, warm and green, and absolutely full of butterflies, hundreds of them, drifting between flowers in slow, unhurried arcs. Amara stood in the middle of it and felt, for the first time in 3 years, completely unhurried herself. A monarch landed on her sleeve. She went very still. She looked at it. Then at Daniel, standing a few feet away, watching her with an expression she was beginning to recognize, that look of a man who was seeing something he did not know he needed to see. She would lose her mind in here, Amara said softly. Bring her, he said. Simply. The program director said any time. She looked at him. You planned this, she said. I made a call, he said. You planned this for Zoe. I made a call for Zoe, he said. And then, more quietly, and I wanted to see your face when you walked in. The butterfly lifted from her sleeve and drifted upward. She looked at him for a long moment. Daniel, she said. Amara, he said. I have a flight in 4 hours. I know. And a daughter in Chicago. I know. And a life that is very full and very complicated and does not have a lot of room for. I know, he said. Gently. I'm not asking you to rearrange anything. She looked at him. Then what are you asking? He was quiet for a moment. I'm asking if I can call you, he said. When you're back. About the grant. And about Zoe's visit. And he paused. About other things. If that's all right? She looked at him for a long moment. The greenhouse was warm. The butterflies moved around them in slow, golden arcs. Yes, she said. That's all right. He nodded once. And the smile that crossed his face, then quiet, genuine, slightly surprised by itself, was the most unguarded thing she had seen from him. She filed it away somewhere careful. They walked back through the garden slowly, side by side, not touching, not needing to. Just two people in a warm green room full of beautiful things, both of them quietly aware that something had shifted, that the world they would each go back to was the same world, but they were not quite the same people they had been 3 days ago. That is the particular, irreversible magic of being truly seen. Once it happens, you cannot unsee yourself. 2 weeks after Atlanta, Amara's phone rang. Not Daniel's number. A Chicago number she didn't recognize. She answered. It was a journalist. A business reporter from a Chicago financial magazine who introduced herself briskly and asked if Amara was available to comment on her relationship with Daniel Adesanya and whether she was aware that Adesanya Capital had recently submitted a proposal to acquire the hospital network she worked for. Amara stood in her kitchen, very still. I'm sorry, she said. What did you just say? The reporter repeated it. Amara thanked her politely, ended the call, and put the phone down on the counter. She stood there for a long moment. Then she picked her phone back up and opened her browser. It took her 4 minutes to find it, a financial news item from 10 days ago, the week after Atlanta. Adesanya Capital was among 3 firms that had submitted acquisition bids for Midwest Regional Health Network, the parent company of her hospital. She read it twice. She sat down at the kitchen table. Zoe was in the living room, arranging a collection of plastic butterflies on the floor in patterns that only made sense to her. Amara looked at her daughter. She thought about every conversation on the rooftop terrace, every question he had asked about the grant, about the hospital, about her work. She thought about the grant application she had emailed him, the full document, her 3 years of work at his request, the week after the conference. She thought about how easy it had been to trust him, how quickly she had let herself. She felt something cold move through her. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse. The particular sick feeling of someone who has been careful her whole life, who has protected herself and her daughter with everything she has, and who is now sitting at a kitchen table wondering if she was simply very, very stupid. She texted him. I need to talk to you. Are you available? He called within 2 minutes. I just got a call from a reporter, she said. Her voice was very controlled. About Adesanya Capital and Midwest Regional Health Network. Silence. Amara. Were you aware of that acquisition bid when we met? Yes, he said. But, were you aware that I worked for a hospital in that network? A pause. Not at first, he said. I found out during the conference. She closed her eyes. And you didn't think to mention it, she said. I was going to. When? Her voice was still level. She was holding it level with everything she had. When I had figured out how to say it without. Without what, Daniel? Without me finding out from a journalist? The silence that followed was very long. I didn't approach you because of the acquisition, he said. I need you to know that. The shoulder that was Amara, none of that was calculated. I believe you, she said. He exhaled. But you still kept information from me, she said. That directly affects my job. My livelihood. My daughter's livelihood. Her voice cracked very slightly on the last word. She pressed past it. I gave you my grant application. I told you about my work. I trusted you with things that I do not trust people with. I know, he said. Quietly. I know. I think, she said, that I need some time. Amara. Please, she said. A pause. Okay, he said. Okay. She ended the call. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. From the living room, Zoe's voice drifted in, narrating a complicated butterfly story to herself in a steady, happy murmur. Amara pressed her palms flat on the table and breathed. She had known, somewhere deep and honest, that something like this was too good to be uncomplicated. She had known. And she had let herself believe anyway. That, she thought, was on her. She didn't call him back for 7 days. She went to work. She picked up Zoe. She made dinner and read the butterfly book and went through the motions of her life with the careful, practiced precision of someone who has survived disappointment before and knows exactly how to keep moving through it. On the 7th day, she got an email. Not from Daniel. From the County Health Board. Her grant application, the third submission, the one Daniel had reviewed, had been approved. Full funding. She sat at her desk at work and read the email 3 times. Then she closed her laptop and went to the break room and stood by the window and thought about what this meant. The grant was hers. Her work. Her 3 years of evenings after Zoe was asleep. Daniel had read it. Yes, had made suggestions. Yes, but the program was hers. The idea was hers. The years of watching her community lack access to health information were hers. She thought about what he had said on the rooftop terrace. You have been doing extraordinary things in a very small room for a long time. She thought about the butterfly garden. His face when she told him about Zoe. She thought about what she actually knew about Daniel Adesanya. She knew he had sat still for 2 hours on a plane so she could sleep. She knew he had made a phone call for a little girl he'd never met because her mother had mentioned, once, that she liked butterflies. She knew he had been honest when she pressed him about his failure with Priya. About the cost of not being present. About the 4 years of trying to do better. She knew he had kept something from her. Something significant. Something she had every right to be hurt by. And she knew sitting in that break room, in the hospital, he might have been playing to acquire that hurt and wrong were not always the same thing. She went back to her desk. She opened her laptop. She started a new email. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone instead. He answered on the first ring. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. A long pause. I got the grant, she said. I know, he said. I saw the board announcement this morning. Amara, that's. It's mine, she said. Not defensively. Just clearly. It was always yours, he said immediately. I read it. I made 2 formatting suggestions. Everything in that document is you. She was quiet for a moment. The acquisition, she said. What happens to my hospital if it goes through? That's not certain yet, he said. But if you want to know, my foundation's charter requires that any acquired healthcare institution maintains its community service commitments for a minimum of 10 years. It's in every proposal we submit. A pause. Your program would be protected. I made sure of that before I submitted the bid. She stared at the wall. You made sure of that, she said slowly. Yes. Before or after Atlanta? A pause. Before, he said quietly. Because I had read about the hospital's community outreach. And I thought it was worth protecting. She closed her eyes. Daniel, she said. Amara. I'm still angry. I know, he said. You should be. And I need you to understand that I come with a 6-year-old who asks complicated questions and a life that doesn't have margins. I understand that, he said. And if you keep anything from me again, I won't, he said. Quiet. Absolute. I won't. She breathed. Zoe wants to see the butterfly garden, she said. The pause before he responded was very small, but very full. When? He asked. This weekend, she said. If that works. It works, he said. She could hear, in the 2 words, the smile she had filed away carefully in a warm greenhouse in Atlanta. She looked at the ceiling of the hospital break room. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Zoe saw the first butterfly and stopped walking entirely. She stood in the middle of the greenhouse path with her mouth open and her eyes enormous, turning slowly in a full circle as the monarchs and swallowtails and painted ladies drifted around her in their unhurried, magnificent arcs. Mama, she whispered. I know, baby, Amara said. Mama. Louder. Not a word of declaration. I know. Zoe turned to Daniel, who was crouching down to her height a few feet away, watching her with an expression that Amara was going to carry with her for the rest of her life. Did you make this? Zoe asked him. Perfectly serious. No, he said. The butterflies made it. Zoe considered this. But you brought us here. Yes. So you made it, she said, with the absolute logical finality of a 6-year-old, and walked further into the garden. Daniel stood up. He looked at Amara. She was already looking at him. She's incredible, he said quietly. Yes, Amara said. She is. They stood side by side, watching Zoe move through the garden, arms out, turning slowly, every butterfly that landed on her receiving a whispered welcome. I need to tell you something, Daniel said. She looked at him. When you fell asleep on the plane, he said, I was going to wake you. In the first 30 seconds, I was going to. He paused. And then I looked at your face. He stopped. You looked like someone who had been running for a very long time and had finally, for 30 seconds, been allowed to stop. She was very still. And I thought he stopped again. I thought that whatever this costs me in awkwardness is worth it if she gets to rest. She felt the words move through her slowly. That was the most she started. Presumptuous? He offered. I was going to say kind, she said quietly. It was the most quietly kind thing anyone has done for me in a very long time. He looked at her. You deserve more of it, he said. She held his gaze. Then she reached out deliberate, unhurried, and took his hand. He went still for a moment. Then his hand closed around hers. They stood like that, watching Zoe and the butterflies, and neither of them said anything for a long time, because nothing needed to be said. 3 months later, Amara's community health literacy program launched in 3 Chicago neighborhoods. The event was covered by 2 local news outlets and a national health publication. In the photograph that accompanied the article, Amara was standing at a podium in a community center, mid-sentence, looking like exactly what she was, a woman who had been given a larger room and had immediately filled it. In the back of the room, not quoted in the article, not identified in the caption, a man stood with his phone in his pocket and his hands free and his full, complete attention on the woman at the podium. He was present. In every way that counted. Zoe, for her part, had begun referring to Daniel simply as the butterfly man and had recently informed Amara that she had decided he could come to her school show and tell if he brought pictures of the garden. He brought pictures. He stayed for the whole thing. Amara sat in the small plastic chair beside him in a room full of 6-year-olds and their parents and felt, for the first time in 3 years, that her life was not something she was surviving. It was something she was living. And somewhere above them, unnoticed and unhurried, a small paper butterfly that Zoe had made in class drifted off the edge of her desk and floated down to the floor. Neither of them rushed to pick it up. They just watched it land. Together. Amara didn't plan to fall asleep on that plane. She didn't plan to wake up with her head on a stranger's shoulder, mortified and disoriented and completely, accidentally human. She didn't plan for the man beside her to be someone worth knowing. She didn't plan for any of it. But here is what I know about the best things in life. They rarely arrive on schedule. They arrive when you are exhausted and your guard is down, and you are wearing yesterday's clothes, and you have long since stopped expecting anything good to walk through the door. They arrive the way Amara arrived at gate B14 running on empty, carrying too much, with absolutely no idea what was about to happen. And all you have to do, all any of us have to do, is not be too proud to rest when the universe offers you a shoulder. Thank you for watching for watching this story. If it moved you, if any part of it felt like something you needed to hear today, please like this video. It takes 1 second and it means everything. Subscribe if you're new. We tell stories like this every single week. Real emotion, real characters, real stakes. And leave a comment below. Tell me, has a stranger ever done something unexpectedly kind for you? Something small that turned out to matter enormously? I read every single one. Until next time, rest when you can. Trust when it's earned. And always, always watch where the butterflies go. They tend to know something we don't.